The morning sun cast long shadows through the crystal windows of the Haven Colony's residential district. Rose stood at her bedroom window, watching the twin moons slowly fade into the dawn sky. At 19, she was neither fully human nor completely stellar, her dual heritage visible in the slight shimmer of her skin and the subtle points of her ears. Her father had always said her differences made her special. "Just like your mother," he would say, smiling at the memory of his first wife, a stellar diplomat who had died when Rose was only 5. But now her father was gone too, lost to the deep mines of Haven 3 months ago. The sound of breaking glass downstairs pulled Rose from her thoughts. She found her stepmother Martha in the kitchen, surrounded by scattered tablets showing gambling debts and loan warnings. The woman's eyes were red, her normally perfect hair disheveled. "This is all your fault," Martha spat, seeing Rose in the doorway. "If your father hadn't left everything to you, I could have paid them back." Rose stepped back, hurt by the venom in Martha's voice. "I told you we could sell some of the mining shares. There's no need to." "Shut up." Martha's hand trembled as she pointed at Rose. "You don't understand anything. These aren't the kind of people who wait for mining shares to mature." Rose had tried to help, really tried, since her father's death. But Martha had pushed her away at every turn, drowning herself in drinks and gambling at the spaceport casinos. Now, watching her stepmother's desperate movements, Rose felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm going to the market," she said quietly, turning to leave. "Maybe we can talk when you're feeling better." Martha's laugh was hollow. Yes, go to the market. Everything will be better soon." Rose hurried through the busy streets of Haven Colony, past the mix of human settlers and alien traders that made up their frontier world. The market square was already bustling, filled with the scents of exotic foods and the chatter of a dozen different languages. She stopped at her favorite stall, where old Tom sold sweet drinks from Earth. "The usual, Rose. Please," she smiled, reaching for her credit chip. The world suddenly tilted sideways. Rose grabbed the edge of the stall, her vision blurring. "Tom, I feel." The old vendor's face grew distant, his worried voice fading away. The last thing Rose saw before darkness took her was a group of tall figures approaching, and Martha's face watching from the shadows. She dreamed of her father, of his strong hands showing her how to test mineral samples, of his proud smile when she managed her first perfect analysis. The dreams turned dark, cold metal against her skin, the hum of engines, voices speaking in harsh unknown languages. Rose woke to find herself in a dimly lit cell. Her clothes had been replaced with a simple gray jumpsuit, and a strange metal band encircled her neck. The cell's energy barrier hummed softly, casting a pale blue light across the metal floor. "You're awake. Good." A rough voice spoke from the next cell. "They like it better when we're conscious for processing." Rose touched the collar around her neck, her fingers trembling. Where am I?" "Slave transport," the voice replied matter-of-factly. "Heading to Nexus 7. Your owner paid good credits for rush delivery." The word owner hit Rose like a physical blow. She curled into herself, remembering Martha's strange behavior, the drugged drink, the watching figures. Her own stepmother had sold her into slavery. Tears rolled down her cheeks, catching the dim light with an inhuman sparkle, a reminder of her mixed heritage. The very thing her father had called special would now make her an exotic prize in the galaxy's darkest markets. Through the barrier, she could see stars streaking past, each one taking her further from the only home she'd ever known. Rose wrapped her arms around her knees and did the only thing she could do. She began to plan her survival. 3 days passed in the darkness of space. Rose learned to count time by the meals pushed through the small slot in her cell's barrier. Her cellmate in the next chamber was a blue-skinned trader who had fallen into debt with the wrong people. He didn't survive the journey. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the small window, Rose saw a massive space station floating against the backdrop of a red giant star. Its shape reminded her of a spider, with long docking arms stretching out into space. "Welcome to Nexus 7, a guard growled, deactivating the cell barriers. "Line up. Anyone who runs gets shocked through their collar." Rose joined the line of captured beings, some human, some alien, all wearing the same gray jumpsuits and metal collars. The guards herded them through cold metal corridors into a large processing area. The air smelled of fear and antiseptic. "Hybrid." One of the guards grabbed Rose's chin, turning her face to examine her slightly pointed ears and shimmering skin. Why wasn't this one marked as special stock? "Papers say she's from some backwater colony." Another guard checked his tablet. "Stepmother sold her. Probably didn't know what she had." Rose pulled away from their touch, earning herself a shock from the collar. The pain brought her to her knees, but she refused to cry out. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The processing area was a nightmare of efficiency. Workers scanned them for diseases, marked their species and abilities on digital tags, and sorted them into different groups. Rose watched as some were taken away for manual labor, others for domestic service. Her group grew smaller and smaller. Entertainment section. A bored-looking processor marked her file. Exotic features, good health, young, should fetch a good price. They were moved to new cells, cleaner but smaller than the ones on the ship. Rose found herself sharing space with 3 others marked for entertainment: a dancer from Earth's colonies, a singer from a world she'd never heard of, and another hybrid like herself. "The auctions start tomorrow," the dancer, who called herself Blue, explained. "They'll clean us up, teach us some basic commands, then sell us to the highest bidder." Rose sat in the corner of the cell, watching people walk past the energy barrier. Buyers examining their stock before the auction. Guards making their rounds. Station workers going about their business as if they weren't surrounded by misery. Then she saw him. He was human, dressed in a cargo pilot's uniform, pushing a cart of supplies. Unlike the others, he actually looked at them, not as merchandise, but as people. His eyes met Rose's for just a moment, and she saw something there. Recognition. Sympathy. He moved on quickly, but not before Rose noticed him slip something under his sleeve as he passed a guard station. "Did you see that?" she whispered to Blue. "See what?" "The handsome cargo guy." "Honey, don't waste your time. The nice-looking ones are usually the worst masters." But Rose couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about him. The way he moved was too careful, too aware. The way he watched the guards while pretending not to. He wasn't just another station worker. That night, as the station's artificial lighting dimmed to simulate evening, Rose heard whispers from other cells. Rumors of a human anti-trafficking force operating in the sector. Stories of successful escapes. Tales of entire slave ships mysteriously disappearing in transit. She touched her collar, thinking of home, of her father's lessons about never giving up. Martha had sold her into this nightmare, but Rose refused to let that be the end of her story. She would watch, she would learn, and she would wait for her chance. As she drifted off to sleep, Rose remembered the cargo pilot's eyes. In a place where most people looked through her as if she wasn't even human, he had seen her, really seen her, and somehow that small moment of connection gave her hope. Tomorrow would bring the auction block, but tonight, Rose dreamed of freedom. Jack walked the corridors of Nexus 7 station with practiced casualness. 6 months of undercover work had taught him how to blend in with the station's workers. His cargo pilot's uniform was stained and worn in all the right places, and his face showed just the right mix of tiredness and boredom. But his eyes missed nothing. In his quarters that night, he activated his secure tablet, hidden inside a fake-powered unit. Day 184, he recorded quietly. Found another hybrid today. Young female, probably from the outer colonies. Stellar heritage visible in physical features. Estimated age, 18 to 20 years. He paused the recording, remembering the girl's eyes. They hadn't shown the usual fear or hopelessness he saw in most captives. Instead, he'd seen intelligence, awareness, and most importantly, fight. Subject appears mentally strong, he continued. Possible priority extraction candidate. We'll observe further before making final recommendation to HATF command. The human anti-trafficking force had planted him on Nexus 7 after reports of increasing slave traffic through the station. His job was to gather evidence, identify key players, and mark high-risk captives for priority rescue. But something about this case felt different. The next morning, Jack pushed his supply cart past the holding cells again. The auction would start in a few hours. He needed to work fast. "Supply check," he announced at the guard station. The board guard barely glanced at his ID before waving him through. Jack carefully placed his sensor unit under the cart, letting it scan the area as he worked. He could see Rose in her cell, sitting straight-backed against the wall. Unlike yesterday, she was dressed in expensive clothes. Auction preparation. The guards had even added subtle makeup to highlight her hybrid features. The sight made his stomach turn. "Cell Block 7 needs cleaning supplies," he told the guard, making sure his voice carried. Rose's head tilted slightly. She was listening. "Good. Whatever," the guard grunted. "Just make it quick." Jack pushed his cart down the row, pretending to check supply levels. His sensor unit quietly mapped guard positions and security systems. As he passed Rose's cell, he fumbled with a cleaning bottle, letting it clatter to the floor. When he bent to pick it up, he whispered quickly, "Don't react. Help is coming. Be ready." Rose showed no sign of hearing him, but he noticed her hands tighten slightly in her lap. She understood. Back in his quarters, Jack sent the encrypted data to his HATF handlers. "Priority extraction requested," he wrote. "Multiple high-risk captives identified. Auction scheduled for today. Recommend immediate action." The response came quickly. "Extraction team en route. Maintain cover. Standard rescue protocol authorized." Jack closed his eyes, remembering the standard rescue protocol. Create a distraction. Disable security systems. Lead captives to designated extraction points. Simple in theory, incredibly dangerous in practice. He checked his hidden compartment, where his real equipment waited. A security override device for the slave collars. A compact stunner disguised as a power tool. Emergency medical supplies. Everything a HATF operative needed for a rescue operation. The station's announcement system crackled to life. "Attention. Special auction beginning in 3 hours. All approved buyers proceed to registration." Jack stood, straightening his uniform. He had 3 hours to finalize his rescue plan. 3 hours to figure out how to save not just Rose, but as many others as he could. 3 hours before everything would either go perfectly right or horribly wrong. He thought of his sister, lost to slavers 10 years ago. They'd never found her. That loss had driven him to join HATF, to dedicate his life to fighting the slave trade. Looking at his reflection in the small mirror, he made a silent promise. "Not this time," he whispered. "Not another one." Picking up his supply cart, Jack headed back out into the station's corridors. He had a role to play, preparations to make, and lives to save. But most importantly, he had hope to protect. The hope he'd seen in Rose's eyes. The kind of hope that could keep someone fighting even in the darkest places. The auction was coming. But so was freedom. The auction hall buzzed with activity. Rose stood with other captives in a holding area behind the main stage, her heart pounding against her ribs. The fine clothes they'd given her felt like a mockery, dressing up merchandise for sale. A guard grabbed her arm roughly. "You're up next, hybrid. Don't forget. Try to look pretty and keep your mouth shut." Through a gap in the curtain, Rose could see the crowd. Wealthy buyers from across the galaxy sat in curved rows, holding electronic bidding devices. Their faces showed different emotions: boredom, interest, greed. But none showed shame for what they were doing. "Lot number 47, the auctioneer announced. "Rare hybrid specimen. Human stellar mix. Verified pure bloodline. Ideal for entertainment or collection. Bidding starts at 50,000 credits." Rose felt sick as she was pushed onto the stage. The lights were too bright, the crowd's eyes too hungry. A floating camera drone circled her, projecting close-up images of her features on large screens. Note the characteristic shimmer of the skin, the auctioneer continued. Perfectly formed ear points, natural grace of movement, a truly exceptional specimen. The bidding began. Numbers flashed on the main screen, climbing higher and higher. Rose forced herself to stay still, even as her mind screamed at her to run. The collar felt tighter than ever around her neck. Movement at the back of the hall caught her eye. The cargo pilot, the one who had promised help, was there, pretending to fix a lighting panel. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod. 200,000 credits. A voice called out. The crowd murmured. Rose saw the bidder, a large reptilian alien wearing expensive clothes and too many rings. 200,000 credits from Lord Cracks. The auctioneer smiled. Do I hear? The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Rose heard shouts of surprise and anger. Then she felt it. The collar around her neck clicked and fell away. Everyone down. A voice shouted. This is a HFY operation. Chaos erupted. Rose dropped to the stage floor as stunner blasts lit up the darkness. She heard guards shouting, buyers screaming, running feet. A hand touched her shoulder. Follow me, the cargo pilot whispered. Stay low. Rose crawled to the edge of the stage. In the emergency lighting, she could see other captives being freed, their collars deactivated by people in dark uniforms. This way, the pilot, she now knew him as her rescuer, guided her toward a service door. I'm Jack. Sorry about the wait. They ran through back corridors, Jack leading the way with a small group of freed captives. Behind them, alarms blared and announcements called for security teams. Stop. A guard appeared ahead of them, raising his weapon. Rose acted without thinking. She grabbed a metal pipe from an open maintenance panel and threw it. Years of helping her father in the mines had made her strong. The pipe hit the guard's hand, sending his weapon clattering away. Jack moved fast, stunning the guard before he could recover. He looked at Rose with newfound respect. Nice throw. They reached a cargo bay where a ship waited, its engines already running. Other rescued captives were being hurried aboard by HFY agents. Final group. Jack called out, We need to move. But Rose hesitated at the ship's ramp. Blue, she said. My cellmate. She's still. Already aboard, Jack assured her. We got as many as we could. Now please, get in. As Rose strapped into a seat, she saw Blue across the hold, crying with relief. Around her, other freed captives held each other, some laughing, some weeping. The ship rumbled as it broke away from the station. Through a small window, Rose watched Nexus 7 grow smaller, this time taking her toward freedom instead of slavery. You're safe now, Jack said, sitting beside her. All of you. Rose touched her neck where the collar had been, feeling the smooth skin there. Thank you, she whispered, but she wasn't just thanking Jack. She was thanking whatever part of herself had refused to give up hope. The stars streaked into lines as the ship jumped to light speed, carrying them away from darkness and toward a new beginning. The HFY rescue ship dropped out of light speed near a space station painted in Earth Alliance colors. Unlike the dark and threatening shape of Nexus 7, this station looked welcoming with its bright lights and open docking bays. Rose sat in the medical bay, wrapped in a warm blanket, watching as doctors checked the freed captives for injuries. The last 6 hours had passed in a blur of debriefings, medical scans, and gentle questioning by HFY officers. Drink this, Jack appeared beside her, holding a cup of real hot chocolate. It helps with the shock. She took the cup, feeling its warmth spread through her hands. What happens now? Now, Jack sat next to her. We make sure everyone gets home safely, and we work on bringing down the people responsible. Rose's hands tightened around the cup. Martha, my stepmother. We already have teams heading to Haven Colony, Jack assured her. She won't get away with what she did. A commotion near the bay doors drew their attention. Blue was refusing to let a doctor examine her, fear clear in her eyes. Rose stood up, walking over to her friend. "It's okay," she said softly. "They're the good ones. Remember how I told you about my father's medical scanner? This is just like that." Blue slowly relaxed, letting the doctor approach. Rose stayed with her, holding her hand through the examination. Jack watched from a distance, seeing how naturally Rose stepped into the role of comforter. Later, in the station's observation deck, Rose stood looking at the stars. They seemed different now, both more beautiful and more dangerous than before. "We found the records." Jack joined her at the window. "Your father's mining shares, your inheritance. Martha couldn't actually access any of it. That's why she sold me," Rose finished quietly. "All of this because she couldn't steal my father's money." Jack hesitated, then pulled out a data tablet. "There's something else. Your mother, the stellar diplomat. She wasn't just any diplomat. She was part of an underground network helping people escape from slavery. That's how she met your father." Rose took the tablet with trembling hands, seeing her mother's picture for the first time in years. The same shimmering skin, the same pointed ears, but most importantly, the same determination in her eyes. "She died protecting 3 families from slavers," Jack explained gently. "Your father kept it secret to protect you. But I thought you should know. Helping others, standing up against slavery, it's in your blood." Tears rolled down Rose's cheeks, catching the starlight like tiny crystals. "I want to help," she said suddenly. "Not just with testimonies against Martha and the slavers. I want to help stop this from happening to others." Jack smiled. "I thought you might say that. HFY could use someone with your unique perspective, someone who understands both human and stellar cultures. But first, you need time to heal." The station's speakers announced dinner time, and Rose could hear the other rescued captives moving toward the dining hall. Blue appeared at the deck entrance, looking more relaxed than before. "Food's ready," Blue called. "Real food, not that processed stuff from the cells." Rose turned from the window, wiping her eyes. "I'll be right there." "Take your time," Jack said. "You're safe here. We all are." As Rose walked with Blue toward the dining hall, she felt different. The horror of what had happened wouldn't go away quickly, but it no longer defined her. She was more than a victim, more than a hybrid, more than what Martha had tried to make her. She was her mother's daughter, her father's child. And now, perhaps, a future HATF agent. The thought made her stand straighter. Behind her, Jack made a call to his commanders. "About that new recruit program we discussed," he said quietly. "I think I've found our first candidate." The station's lights dimmed slowly, simulating evening, but for the first time in days, Rose wasn't afraid of the dark. She had found more than rescue here. She had found purpose. And somewhere in the stars, she knew her parents would be proud. The courtroom on Haven Colony felt smaller than Rose remembered. She sat in the witness chair, looking directly at Martha, who wore prisoner's gray instead of her usual expensive clothes. 3 months had passed since the rescue, and now justice was finally coming. "Please state your name for the court," the judge said. "Rose Winters, daughter of Michael Winters and Lyra of Stellar House Bright Dawn." Martha flinched at the mention of Rose's mother's name. She looked older now, her face lined with worry and fear. "Miss Winters," the prosecutor stood, "please tell the court what happened on the morning of market day." Rose spoke clearly, her voice steady. She told them everything. The drug drink, waking up in the slave transport, the horrors of Nexus 7. As she spoke, she saw faces in the crowd grow angry and disgusted. Many of them had known her father, had watched her grow up. "And you're certain it was the defendant who arranged this?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." Rose nodded. "The slaver's records proved it. She sold me for 5,000 credits and gambling debt forgiveness." A murmur of outrage went through the courtroom. 5,000 credits. That's what Martha had valued her stepdaughter's life at. Jack sat in the back of the courtroom, wearing his HATF uniform. He'd come to support her testimony, bringing evidence from the raid on Nexus 7. Rose drew strength from his presence. The defense may question the witness, the judge announced. Martha's lawyer stood, looking uncomfortable. Miss Winters, isn't it possible that you misunderstood? Play the recording, Rose interrupted, her voice firm. The court clerk activated a holographic display. Martha's voice filled the room. She's half stellar, that makes her valuable, right? I don't care what you do with her. Just take her and clear my debts. The lawyer sat down without asking any more questions. When it was Martha's turn to speak, she tried to blame everything on the gambling bosses, on her desperation, on her grief over Rose's father's death. But her words rang hollow against the evidence. Martha Collins, the judge's voice was cold. You have been found guilty of human trafficking, child endangerment, and conspiracy with criminal organizations. This court sentences you to 20 years in the colonial prison system. As security officers led Martha away, she looked at Rose one last time. I'm sorry, she whispered. Rose didn't respond. Some things couldn't be fixed with simple words. Outside the courthouse, Haven's twin sons were setting. Jack waited for her at the bottom of the steps. How do you feel? He asked. Free, Rose answered. Really free for the first time since father died. They walked through the market square where it had all started. It looked different now. HATF officers patrolled openly, and new security systems scanned for signs of trafficking activity. The training program starts next month, Jack said. Are you still sure about joining? Rose stopped at her father's old mineral shop, now closed and empty. More sure than ever. But first, I need to do something. The next day, Rose signed papers transferring most of her inheritance to a new foundation, one dedicated to helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. She kept enough to live on and pay for her training, but the rest would go to people who needed it more. Your mother would be proud, Jack said as they left the lawyer's office. Both your parents would. Blue called yesterday, Rose smiled. She's doing better. The trauma counseling is helping, and she's thinking about joining the foundation as a counselor herself. They reached the spaceport where a HATF transport waited. Rose looked back at her hometown one last time. Haven Colony had been both home and prison to her, but now it would be something else, a reminder of why she was choosing this new path. Ready to go? Jack asked. Rose touched the HATF cadet badge on her new uniform. Ready. The transport lifted off, carrying her toward her future. Behind her, Martha sat in her prison cell, and below her, a new foundation prepared to help others find their freedom. Justice had been served, but Rose knew her real work was just beginning. 1 year later, Rose stood on the bridge of the HATF patrol ship Guardian, watching the starred streak past. Her cadet uniform had been replaced with a full officer's insignia, earned through hard work and dedication. Officer Winters, Captain Jack called from his command chair. Sensors picking up a distress signal. Rose moved to her station, fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Her hybrid heritage gave her an advantage. She could see energy patterns others missed, could sense disturbances in space that normal sensors might overlook. Confirmed, she reported. Cargo ship, running silent. Energy signature matches known slave transport configurations. The bridge crew tensed. They'd been tracking this particular slave ring for months, following leads from Rose's growing network of informants. Many were survivors she'd helped rescue, now working secretly to identify trafficking routes. Time to earn our pay, Jack smiled. Officer Winters, you're leading the boarding team. Rose checked her gear in the shuttle bay, remembering her own rescue a year ago. Her team, a mix of humans and aliens, watched her with trust in their eyes. They'd learned to respect both her abilities and her insight into the slavers' methods. Remember, she briefed them, there are probably scared people over there. We're not just fighting slavers, we're saving lives. The shuttle launched smoothly from the Guardian's Bay. As they approached the cargo ship, Rose activated her special scanner, a device she'd helped design, based on her father's old mining equipment. It could detect life signs through heavy shielding. 23 captives, she reported. 8 guards. They're using the new collar design we saw last month. Good thing we have your override codes, her teammate Tom grinned. Rose had spent weeks working with HFY engineers to crack the new slave collar system. The boarding went perfectly. Rose's team moved through the ship like shadows, stunning guards before they could raise alarms. When they reached the holding cells, she felt her heart skip. The captives included 2 young hybrids, just like she had been. "It's okay," she told them in both human and stellar languages. "We're here to help. You're safe now." Back on the Guardian, Rose helped the medical team check the rescued captives. A familiar face appeared in the medbay doorway. Blue, now a full-time counselor with the Winters Foundation. "I came as soon as I got your message." Blue hugged her. "How are they doing?" "Better, now that they're free. The Foundation can help them rebuild their lives." Later, in the ship's observation lounge, Rose and Jack watched the cargo ship being towed to an Alliance station. Another slave ring would face justice. Another group of captives would get a second chance at life. "Your final evaluation came in." Jack handed her a tablet. "The promotion board unanimously approved you for team leader." Rose looked at the commendation, seeing her full name. Rose Winters Brighton, honoring both her human father and stellar mother. "We've saved over 200 people this year," she said quietly. "And you've helped twice that many through the Foundation." Jack added, "Your parents would be proud." "I know I am." Rose touched the star-shaped pendant at her neck, a graduation gift from Jack, made from a piece of Haven Colony crystal. It shimmered like her skin, a reminder of who and what she was. A soft alert chimed from the ship's computer. Another distress signal, another chance to help. Rose straightened her uniform and headed for the bridge, Jack falling into step beside her. "Ready for another rescue?" he asked. Rose smiled, feeling the strength of both her heritages, the love of her real parents, and the support of her new family in HATF. Always ready. The Guardian turned toward the new coordinates, its engines humming with power. In her quarters, Rose kept a small holo image, her father in his mining gear, her mother in diplomatic robes, both smiling proudly. Next to it stood a newer picture, Rose with her HATF team, Blue and Jack, all working together to fight the darkness they'd once faced alone. Martha had tried to sell her into slavery, but human love had set her free. And now Rose would spend her life making sure that love and freedom would always win. The end.